Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Ayurveda with Noreen podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, I ask that you follow me so that we can continue to cultivate awareness around the wisdom of Ayurveda, as well as spotlight the awesome individuals who are committed to bringing it out there. Today, I am joined by a wonderful guest, Susan Barney. Susan is a recent graduate of the Masters of Ayurveda program at Maharishi University. She comes equipped with a previous high-powered career in marketing communications. And in today's chat, we're going to explore how she intends to share the wisdom teachings of Ayurveda with her world. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. I just want to correct, I have one more year before I graduate. I finished
my
second.
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that. Well, last year you're downhill slope now. That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, you have a wonderful background there. You've got lots of trees. So you're incorporating the earth element. I see the wind going. So you've got the air element. That's awesome. How beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. It feels wonderful. It's feast for the eyes.
So I want to start with just a little bit about you. A question that I sometimes like to ask is how Ayurveda found you.
How Ayurveda found. Sorry about that. I had a ant crawling up my leg. How Ayurveda found me. Okay. Well, I was, and again, sorry about the ants. I was very sick. I had lost a job and I had stage 4 endometriosis. And it just seemed to me like the doctors were addressing symptoms instead of root causes. And so I don't know, like just this inner voice kind of started telling me that. And so I started looking for solutions that would address root causes. And my first introduction to Ayurveda, I was like going through a couple of doctors. This was like in the late 90s, I guess. And I finally stumbled across a couple that really, really opened my eyes to the power of nutrition and healing. And, one of them was a woman who was a Russian registered nurse who became a doctor of Oriental medicine and also like integrated some kind of Eastern European naturopathy into the Oriental medicine. And I healed so much working with her. And I also, learned so much about how nutrition impacts even a little bit of something that's irritating for you can really take you off balance. But at the same time, also, I was delving into raw foodism. And there's a doctor named Dr. Gabriel Cousins, who is both a psychiatrist and a family practitioner. And Dr. Cousins had studied Ayurveda in India back in the 1970s. And so he was the first one to introduce this idea that we need individualized diets. And when we have individualized diets for our constitution, for where we are right now, not like a predestined constitution, but for what our current imbalance is.
And Dr. Gabriel Cousins, he was the founder of Tree of Life, right, in Arizona.
Yeah, he was not a founder, the founder of Tree of Life in Arizona.
The founder of the healing center, Tree of Life. And I believe his main book, one of the main books is Conscious Eating?
Yes. And another one would be Spiritual Nutrition and the Rainbow Diet. And in Conscious Eating, he talks about how, at the time there was all this, the idea of the blood type diet was very popular. But the guy who did that, he was a naturopath in a state where he couldn't order blood tests. So it was a theory. Okay. And so Dr. Cousins was a licensed doctor. He was a family practitioner and a psychiatrist. And he started bringing people into his place and feeding them different foods and seeing how they reacted and what their blood did. And over a period of time, he was able to, plus integrating his Ayurvedic knowledge. And he started realizing just, that blood type, there were some issues with the blood type diet, he said, but there are other things that sometimes take precedence over something like that. Like sometimes it's our nervous system, or sometimes it's our like our parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system. Other times it's our metabolism that's driving us. And so, when you get onto the right diet for you, that addresses a lot of problems. Like, he was a psychiatrist, and he said, just when you get on the right diet from you, like for not even going into the nitty gritty of the Vata Pitta Kapha, but just like he said, some people naturally need more protein and fats. Some people naturally need more carbohydrates. Of course, we're talking whole carbohydrates like whole grains and sweet potatoes and all that. And just getting onto the right diet for you addresses, from that macro perspective, helps alleviate like 80% of mental disorders.
Yeah, well, that's just so, a couple of things I want to just follow up on what you're saying. It's interesting that you came to Ayurveda through Dr. Gabriel Cousins, who's the proponent of, a major component of raw living foods, raw foods, and Ayurveda has a very different take on that. But I think I like what you brought up about, first of all, there's a couple things with Gabriel Cousins in that book, Conscious Eating. He devotes an enormous amount of that text to Ayurveda in that text. And also, and he's very much in tune with, because of the spirituality of food, and just, the spiritual component of living. He's very much in tune with the energetic effect of food. And of course, that's a psychiatric component in the mind. And also looking at Ayurveda, and he's a big proponent of personalized medicine. There's not a one size fits all approach. And of course, that's an Ayurvedic approach as well.
And that's probably where he got his initial foundation for the work that he's done,
Yeah, awesome. And so then you were looking at Food and Healing and Gabriel Cousins, and you saw that, gee, here's this, proponent of living raw foods writing about Ayurveda, and then what?
Well, I was also going through, I had stage 4 endometriosis, and, they were saying, well, you can go and get another surgery. It would have been my second. I was trying to preserve my uterus because I was in my late 30s. And I was looking for something to reverse it. What I came to in the end was I managed it, but I didn't reverse it. But I learned a lot about what causes the pain and what certain foods were big triggers for me. And that came a lot from, some of the things I learned from Dr. Gabriel Cousins and his books and his lectures, because I saw him a number of times at that period of time, but then also through this traditional Chinese medicine doctor, and who was this Russian woman, and some of the books that she exposed us to. Like there's this one called Food and Healing, and that's Anne-Marie Kolben, of course. And that's where you went, isn't it? The Natural Health Institute.
Yes. Anne-Marie Kolben, the founder of the Natural Gourmet Institute, and that's really the seminal book, Food and Healing, and really is very Ayurvedic in terms of the energetics of food.
And it just opened my mind, and it put it into such terms as I guess, I'm not sure, I thought it was macrobiotic, but you told me recently that it was more Chinese, the Chinese balance of.
I think Anne-Marie Kolben was trained in both macrobiotics, but she was definitely trained in macrobiotics.
Yeah.
But the basis is the foundation, and there's so much interconnection between all of these approaches to food and healing. But I think she was mostly using the Chinese 5-element theory, but it's very much akin to macrobiotics, and Ayurveda is the elements and the food energetics as well. So it's all interrelated.
Yeah. Well, what we're taught in our coursework at Maharishi International University is that the original body of knowledge came from Ayurveda, and then it moved, it migrated to these other places. And I just, I bought the book and put it in my cubicle at work. And I remember this one colleague calling me up to cancel a meeting because he had a migraine, and we rescheduled for the next week. And so I pulled this book out of the bookshelf, and I said, well, let's see what it says about migraines. And it said that there were 3 different types of from the macrobiotic perspective, 3 different types of headaches, one of which would be a expansive headache. The other will be liver contractive. And then the migraine is an extreme liver contractive. And so what you wanted to do was to avoid the foods that were overly young or overly, like salty and heavy. And, you needed something to expand more, not like contract more. And so I listed a bunch of things that were in the book. And he's like, oh, I ate those the day before the migraine. And he came back to me like 6 months later and he's like, Susan, I haven't had a migraine in 6 months. So that gave me more joy than the work that I was doing, when I was, working in the corporate world. And I think that, I always knew that nutrition, and I was experimenting on myself too, like, what would happen when I ate the foods that I was told not to eat. And, I actually wound up in the hospital needing an emergency surgery when I ate too much of something that I wasn't supposed to be eating. And one of my endometrium burst or whatever. And so I had emergency surgery and 6 weeks off work and had to recover and all that kind of stuff. And so I really learned, when foods, I would go into the doctor's office and I'd say, well, I ate these things and my pain level has gone high enough that I need a narcotic. And when I was working with a reproductive endocrinologist who specialized in endometriosis, I could have all the narcotic pain meds that I wanted. But when I was working with a gynecologist, they're like, oh, you're drug seeking. Yeah, you ate these foods, you ate these foods.
Susan, yeah. Yes, definitely. We're definitely on the same page regarding just the intimate connection between food and the elements in food and the impact on body, mind, the physiology as well as spirit. So you were becoming intrigued by Ayurveda, interested in it. It piqued your interest looking at it in Gabriel Cousins' books. So what propelled you to actually commit to studying Ayurveda formally?
Well, I had figured out that I had a passion for food and healing, and psychics were telling me that, Vedic astrologer told me that. But, and so I figured, okay, I don't want to go back and become a registered dietitian. My mom was a registered dietitian. I just didn't want to go back. And I mean, I already had 1 master's degree at that point in time. And then I was thinking about taking one of these courses to become a nutritional consultant, but I just knew that I would have to go back and also study Ayurveda because there would be a missing piece. It's like, oh, kale is a superfood, but not if you've got a Vata imbalance, then it's going to be really happening, right? And so I just knew that I was going to have to do this nutrition consultant program, then become study Ayurveda afterwards. And so then I was just like, why not just do Ayurveda first and get that foundation there? Because it's, the individuation, at the time I was just thinking about the physical aspects, of physical healing. But when we get into the program, what we learn is that Ayurveda, the science of life, isn't just about balancing your body so that you don't have disease. It's also about balancing the mental and the emotional and the spiritual so that we're in alignment with our highest good. Like some cultures believe that, we're all here with a divine spark, a gift to bring to our communities. And it's hard for us to do that. Like think about Jim Henderson, who created the Muppets, right? Imagine if his father had been, had a big law firm and he's like, Dad, I want to go and become the best puppeteer in the world. And his father would have said, no, you need to do something that's practical, join the law firm, and Ayurveda is about getting us in alignment with our highest self and giving us the courage to hear the messages that are telling you, oh, this is where your true path is. And, so get on it, and I'm going to be 60 by the time I graduate because I was afraid. It took me a long time to have the vision, have the courage to do the vision, and then to finally decide to put Ayurveda first. And I think Ayurveda is just like the greatest foundation for, let's talk about blood pressure. And blood pressure, the typical recommendation is to avoid salt.
Well, actually, before we do that, I want to just touch upon, just for our viewers and listeners, just about what you just said, which was really beautiful. Thank you for what you just said about Ayurveda, which was really beautiful. Thank you for that. You use certain words that I think are important, because, it's kind of like yoga in a way. I mean, yoga and Ayurveda are so interconnected, intertwined. One is supporting the other. You can't have one without the other. But yoga, it doesn't matter how you come in the door. Once you come in, then it's an evolution. It's an evolutionary process with yoga. It's an evolution in consciousness, essentially. But with Ayurveda, you've indicated that you've come through the door because of your interest in food and healing, but wanting something more, realizing that food's not just, the Western approach to food is micronutrients and macronutrients. And, we just get lost in all that. And we're really losing the individual in the process and the energetics of the food in the process. So some of the words that you described, well, first of all, I look at Ayurveda as a journey to wholeness.
Yes.
And that's you talked about the body, mind, and spirit, the awareness that disease, feeling uneasy is not limited to the physical components of our lives. That are we aligned? And alignment is really one of the best words to describe Ayurveda, because when we are aligned, and Ayurveda supports that alignment, along with a regular meditation practice, when we are aligned, then we can, we do have the courage, we become less fearful, we become fearless, we have the confidence to execute our dharma.
Yes.
And to be in our dharma, to live in our dharma, and actually to allow our dharma to find us.
Yes. And yes, exactly. And for me, it's like I had been getting messages for 30 years. Well, I guess it's maybe 25 years or something, but I didn't have the courage. I wasn't in alignment. So I couldn't, whatever messages that I heard, it was like a passion for something, but I couldn't see the path forward. And I was too afraid. And it took me years to break free of the bounds that had been placed on me by society and my family about what was a good career and what was valid. And I think when you're in, like, Ayurveda means the science of life. When you're following the science of life, it's not just about what you eat, it's about what your daily routine is, and what how you're preparing things. And it's a whole, and it's not just about to be physically healthy, it's about like Sadhaka Pitta is the physical heart, but the emotional heart. And if we can get stuck in old emotions that haven't been metabolized into bliss. And if you're in alignment with Ayurveda, with your highest self, then when something bad happens, you are able to metabolize it into bliss and not, create some kind of a long-standing grudge against somebody or something because they hurt you.
Yeah, we have, especially with the regular practice of transcendental meditation and a meditation practice in general, we have the ability to release stress and release some of those habitual patterns that get lodged in the body.
And stress would be pranavata. That's
pranavata, but also the emotions, like you said, the stuck emotions, the emotional heart, which is Sadhaka Pitta, which is a sub dosha of the Pitta, So yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
That's why Ayurveda is so beautiful, because it's the holistic approach.
Yeah. And
the awareness that all of this conditioning and these habitual patterns, and that, we can feel very stuck in this. And there is a way out, and it's a process. But it's a continuous practice. It's the daily routine. It's our meditation practice. It's mantras. It's cultivating the heart. And with all of this over time, there's a cumulative effect.
Yeah. And I think you become more resistant to, the things that try to knock us out of our center. Or when you do go out of your center, you have the tools to be able to come back much more quickly. And
I love that. I like to use the word, a couple of words come to mind there: accommodate. So I think we start to have a greater ability to accommodate whatever is in our sphere of influence at the moment, our environment. And you use the word resilience, which is, so important. But I think the resilience comes from, it's not like we're hardening to be resilient. I think in a way it cultivates a softening.
So we're flexible. Flexible resilience.
There's a greater feeling of flexibility and ease and confidence to be in all situations. It doesn't mean we're not going to get knocked off our feet occasionally. Right. But I find with the regular practice of Ayurveda and meditation, that happens less and less often. And then I'm actually starting to enjoy even those difficult situations.
Yeah. And
does that ring true for you as well?
Yeah. And what I also find is that, it sounds so funny, but like when you're experiencing heartbreak, I had some very traumatic things that have been going on for the past several years in my family. And, I noticed that when I started doing things, like drinking tea with rose, like there's a commercial tea that's like Tulsi with rose. And, of course, the Tulsi calms the emotion, the mental aspect, which would be pranavata, and, where you have anxiety and worry. And then the rose really addresses the heart. And what Ayurveda teaches us is that instead of being stuck in these emotions, which sometimes we can be stuck in a hurt or an anger, towards someone for years or decades in the family. And by taking these things, it helped me to metabolize them, to let them go, so that they're not as difficult for me emotionally. But then also there's the physical component. Like we had some days here that were
actually I want to touch on that. You use the word metabolize, and I love that word in Ayurveda. It's used interchangeably with transformation. So in and that's we can have physical transformation in terms of the digestion and the metabolism, but we also have this emotional component where everything that we take in has to be processed and has to be metabolized, and so even if we can transform
even our touch, or what we see, it's a beautiful trees and pines and undergrowth, and it's it's beautiful and it's soothing, and we metabolize that. We metabolize what we smell, and all of these things are something we're taking in. Like in Ayurveda, Alochika is both the outer vision, which we metabolize, like, I'm seeing this beautiful forest, but it's also the inner vision. I apologize for the noise. I'm driving down to Cape May and I had to pull over on the side of the road.
That's okay. We do recordings in every environment. I love your background with the trees. That's awesome. I think this is the best background I've seen so far. So we'll deal with the little road noise.
Yeah, I'm in the
That's
binder.
wonderful. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
so I
So you
forget
were
what.
talking about the Aloshika Pitta,
Yeah, so
which is a
Aloshika Pitta,
subdosha of Pitta
Pitta.
dosha,
Yeah, and
and
it
the
has to do
outer
with the
vision
eyes
and inner vision.
and the inner vision. And like
Right.
sometimes like you can be, if Alochika Pitta is not working, you're not going to be able to connect very well with your inner vision. And when I did Panchakarma and I had the Vaidya, read my pulse, and I was like, well, what's at the deep pulse, which is the tissue level, not the deep pulse, but the tissue level, which is where things have started to get really serious. And the three things for me that were at the tissue level were pranavata, and I've been diagnosed with a medically untreatable neurological brain damage, and then Alochika Pitta, and then Alochika Pitta and Sadhaka Pitta. So pranavata. So it's like lots of anxiety, lots of grief and anger and and fear and anxiety up here in pranavata, and then maybe a difficult time looking for the inner wisdom on how to, like, I'm blocked a little bit from my inner wisdom in terms of like how to move forward on these, where to go with these, what's the best way to handle a lot of these situations. And so it's just been, it provides you with, learning how to do, let me take a tangent off here. Is one of the key things that we learn in the program is Nadi Vigan, which is like where we're doing the pulse reading. And this is
before we go into the pulse, I actually want to go back to what you were saying about, so having some awareness of, the interrelation between the doshas, which are both balance and imbalance. And, we have these more subtle layers of the doshas called the subdoshas, and having some awareness of, from an Ayurvedic perspective, where some of the sources of imbalance are for you, the Alochika Pitta, the eyes. So that would be both your outer vision, what you're seeing, and your inner vision. And having that foundation that's saying, okay, there's some blockage here, and there's some relation between these other subdoshas as well that are giving me problems. And so then there's some practices that you can bring into your life that, it's not necessarily an overnight fix, but they do have a cumulative effect. You can be doing mantra meditation. You can be, if with Sadhaka Pitta, you can be cultivating practices to open the emotional heart.
Essential oil too.
Essential oils. Yeah. So I mean, there's so many things, and it's it's a multifaceted approach. It's kind of, and that sort of approach, people will say, well, it really can be, it's not one thing. So that multifaceted approach that Ayurveda advocates can be very, very effective. And I have found, even in my own personal experience, that in terms of improving personal family relations and healing the emotional heart, the practices of Ayurveda, for me, have been quite profound.
Yeah. And I've been very shocked by how, I can remember times where I broke up with a boyfriend and I was hurting at a place that was twice the length of our relationship. And I was still hurting because I was having a hard time metabolizing these emotions. And now it's like, oh, I'm feeling like this. I should do more rose tea. I should do more of these types of foods. I should do, more of these types of practices and help me to move through that, so that I can metabolize those into bliss and let them go, so that they're not holding me back, so that I'm not, in some kind of an argument, with somebody else that happened years ago or decades ago.
Yeah, because without processing and metabolizing, we really can't enjoy our lives. We're in the past, and we're bringing the past into the now, and all we have is the now, and it's this precious moment. So I want to move, Susan, to, what do you envision for yourself professionally? How do you want to bring Ayurveda out into the world?
Well, first of all, with a lot of the problems that I've had, Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, stage 4 endometriosis, endometrial cancer. I was literally diagnosed, medically disabled. I went from like one of the top 1% of female wage earners down to living below the poverty level. And for me, like one of the first things I want to be doing, or I am in the process of doing, is healing myself, because Ayurveda, like they say there's 6 stages of disease in Ayurveda. The modern medicine only starts recognizing things at the 4th stage. So in Ayurveda, you're finding something out at a much earlier stage, and there's more subtle understandings of what the problem is so that you can be more insightful. Like if you have diabetes, there's not one diabetes.
That's a great point, actually. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So basically it's like, first of all, heal thyself, right? Because then you see like, oh, I'm trying to do this diet. And then you're kind of getting tired of these particular spices, and then you crash, and then you're eating chocolate, so it's very important for us as Ayurvedic practitioners to like move, walk the path as much as possible so that we understand the pitfalls. But what I want to do is, I've had so many illnesses that have been really helped by diet, not cured, but managed by diet. So then you layer in the conventional medicine. Some things will be balanced out. We can't say cured, but brought into balance just through Ayurveda. But other things that are more severe, you're also going to need to work with allopathic medical doctors. And there's
you're going to use complementary approach.
Yeah. And I think where I want to fit in is right now there's a crisis in our country in terms of healthcare, because for, over 100 years, the focus of healthcare has been on addressing symptoms. It's about, oh, you've got gangrene on your foot, let's chop it off. Oh, you've got a cancerous tumor, let's burn it out, or let's chop it out. And it's addressing, oh, you've got a chemical hormonal imbalance, let's take away all your hormones. And it's addressing these symptoms, and it's not working. It's not working to heal people. It's maybe on some levels you'll get over certain diseases or whatever, but the imbalance is still there, which is what Ayurveda is telling us. So it's like you might have pushed it down here, but it might come up here later in a different form, but it's the same imbalance. And so what I would like to do is to work with with allopathic medical doctors who understand that they need to start integrating the knowledge of nutrition and the knowledge of a balanced way of living in order to help their patients get to the next level of coming into balance, reversing disease, managing and controlling disease, or whatever it is that's available for them. And you see this, like Kaiser Permanente is one of the top healthcare systems in the United States, and it's unique in that it's the largest HMO. So they have their own hospitals and their own doctors, and they're giving insurance, and so their profits are maximized by having very, very few people get sick. Most people stay healthy, and for them to get better quickly. And so they're constantly looking at other approaches to bring in, apart from the allopathic medical approach, where they've been doing experiments out in California and probably other parts of the Kaiser system on like acupuncture and meditation and all these sorts of things. And what they've found is that one of the best things is if people embrace a plant-based diet, a vegan diet. And so they actually work with people, outside of Kaiser who have some kind of a nutritional certification, so that those people, they'll refer their patients, like type 2 diabetes patients or whatever, to go to your classes and to have you teach them how to eat a healthy diet. And with Ayurveda, we're not just saying, oh, this is the diet for type 2 diabetes. We can say, you've got more of a Vata type of approach. So you can do this, but you shouldn't do that. These would be better. These would be best to avoid. And so it gives us a more pinpointed approach. And I think that the Western model, back in the Civil War, there was much more knowledge about naturopathy and homeopathy. And then around the turn of the 1900s, around the turn of the century back then, there was the rich people, like the robber barons, like JP Morgan, started doing funding research into pharmaceuticals. And it must have, seemed great. Like, oh, these people are too poor to eat healthy and live a healthy diet. Let's just give them a pill. This guy would prefer to eat oysters on the half shell and drink brandy than eat a healthy diet. Let's just give him a pill. And that's the way we have been
pill for now.
trained. Yeah. But now it's not working. It's not, they've been trying it for 100 years and it's not reversing diabetes. But when you start to, incorporate dietary things, there are peer-reviewed studies where people are reversing diabetes with a plant-based diet, like Dr. Furman, Dr. McDougall, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
all these doctors who are promoting plant-based.
And they've done their own
Dr. Neil Bernard and
on
they're,
their
and
approach.
they're doing a great job.
And then if you layer in the Ayurvedic perspective, the Ayurvedic knowledge, like Dr. Furman has had some success with people who have irritable bowel disease, like ulcerative colitis. Well, when I look at what he's recommending, it's good, but it doesn't bring in the Ayurvedic perspective. Like, he's allowing things that might be a little bit too hot, in Ayurveda, we learn, okay, it starts with anxiety. It starts with pranavata imbalance. And then it goes down, and it can go one way and become ulcerative colitis, or it can go another way and become Crohn's disease. But you need to address those root problems. And so the diet that he's recommending, it needs to balance vata and pitta. And the diet that he's recommending is, okay, but it's still a little bit too spicy for pitta balancing. And it
could be aggravating.
Yes. And so if you go in there with this extra knowledge, I think that you can, I think Dr. Furman and his type 2 diabetes approach, it was like 60 some odd % of the people were able to become non-diabetic within 6 months. Type 2 diabetics get off of their drugs and everything like that. So, but then if you add the Ayurvedic perspective, I think you can get it there much quicker.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it sounds like your plans are essentially, you'd like to take a complementary approach with Ayurveda and allopathic medicine to bring it in and to really enhance what some of the practitioners are doing out there at the moment, who are open to alternative and complementary approaches, especially in certain HMO situations where the wellness paradigm actually increases shareholder profitability and is welcomed and encouraged. Yeah.
And actually, there was something else that I wanted to add into that, but senior moment, I forget what it was. But so basically to help people heal. And that was it. One thing I want to emphasize is that, okay, I had cancer. When they first discovered it, it was like stage 2A or something. And, I had been a raw foodist before, and a lot of raw foodists, people have reversed cancer with a raw food diet, like the Hippocrates Institute and all those sorts of things. From that perspective, I knew a lot of things about it. So I started doing these things, which were, did shrink the tumors, but I had to be very careful. And if I fell off the diet, then the tumor would grow again. And I was trying I'm going to heal myself with this holistic approach, and then, tell the doctors they can stuff their chemo and their radiation therapy. And at the same time, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so I would go into these cancer hospitals, or any kind of hospital that my dad was in, or I had to go for a test. And this message kept coming through to me, like, it's your ego that wants to heal holistically. You need to go and, get the conventional treatment, and then use what you know to heal from the effects of the chemo and the radiation afterwards. And so it took me a while to listen to this voice. And afterwards, I was talking to this guy who's an Ayurvedic medical intuitive, and he confirmed what I said. He said, yeah, you had some past life karma that you were burning off the karma from. And if you had healed yourself through the holistic approach only, you wouldn't have burned off the karma. So you would have developed something else. And I said, so what you're saying is that in order to burn off this karma, I had to, in essence, damage my body through the chemo and the radiation to burn off that karma and then, move forward. And he goes, yeah, that's basically it. And so since then, I've been a whole lot more humble about, feeling like, yeah, we can just, heal this with diet alone. And so I encourage people to, not completely, we might have, it's not just about healing the disease. There are other things in the spirit realm that the disease might be addressing. And if we just think it's about going off of the chemo because chemo is toxic, that might be exactly what we need, not just on the physical level, but on the emotional and the spiritual level. And I mean, we're not going to know until we die. Hopefully we'll be able to know when we die, get all the answers. But so I've taken a much more humble approach about.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, I think what you're indicating is that, when we are confronted with disease, well, first of all, humility sets in, there's no doubt. And we become more willing to maybe look at everything. And I think your own experience, you've learned to not exclude anything, essentially.
Yeah. And also, if the first thing was my ego, I thought I was doing the holistic thing. And at the same time, I had a friend who was trying to do that, and he ended up dying of cancer. Now, I don't know, maybe he would have died anyway. But in fact, I had two friends who were like, I wouldn't want to damage my body with the chemo. And they both died. And then another friend who was, a doctor going through it at the same time. And of course, she was just like, whatever they say, I'm going to do it. And I was like telling her, oh, you need to start juicing wheatgrass. And, but I think we need to be humble about that. And, but at the same time, I did get the message that I was supposed to use the natural methods to heal myself afterwards. And I bought this book on Ayurveda, but I couldn't figure out for the life of me how to cook it and make it taste good. And so when I was driving back, I was in Houston at MD Anderson, and I had to drive back all the way to Wyoming. And I stopped off in Albuquerque, which is where Vasant Lad had his school. It's now moved to North Carolina. But and I went to Annapurna there and in Santa Fe. And when I ate the food there, I had read that, looked up like Ayurveda, and this is before I started studying it. And there were some studies that said that when you do chemo and radiation, these are heating, sorry, I'm don't have a very stable thing here and that's shaking, but these are pitta imbalancing. They're going to heat you up and dry you out, which is vata imbalancing. This is
some of these herbs or some of these spices. Is that what you're indicating? Or
no,
foods?
Well, the chemo and the radiation.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right.
So when I got to Albuquerque, I'd read that, but, and I'd bought some ingredients, but I couldn't figure out how to make something that was going to be palatable to me. So when I got to Annapurna in Albuquerque, and I had like a pitta balancing food, and it was international cuisine. It wasn't like all Indian cuisine. And there was this part of me inside that just like bit into this cooling foods that was just delicious. And like, I felt like every cell in my body just went, like,
yeah. And I don't know if Annapurna is still there, but it's a restaurant in Albuquerque, and it used to also be in Santa Fe. I don't think it's in Santa Fe anymore, but it's really? An Ayurvedic restaurant. Yes. And it's very, very good. Very good. Yeah. That's, you bring up a good point, because, to learn to cook Ayurvedically, it's not rocket science, but it does require some practice in terms of, kind of practicing with your own body and spice blends, and which they call churnas, and what makes sense. And after a while, it really is an intuitive approach. It becomes that way, but at first it's going to be a little bit awkward. And there's going to be a lot of, practice and a little bit of frustration, perhaps, that sort of thing. So but it's really, this is a plug, but also a wonderful book, a recommendation for viewers and listeners. For those who, I really found this book to be, I use it to this day regularly, and it is super simple to use. And it's Divya Alter's book on Ayurvedic cooking, what to eat for how you feel. And I love that title because, maybe you don't feel like having a certain something today. So, you don't eat that today. So it's all about, the attunement, tuning in. And you can actually take her recipes and you can Instant Pot. She doesn't have Instant Pot directions, but I Instant Pot all of her recipes. And you know what? It's super easy, super simple, and really delicious.
Yeah, and she has a new one coming out that's going to get into more international things. And so a lot of times, like I took some of these Ayurvedic courses, and it's like, okay, we're going to do Mexican, but it was just like they took the Ayurvedic herbs and they just took Mexican things and just made it taste exactly like everything else. Whereas I think with Divya, he's trying to get the flavors of these different cultures in, so that it doesn't all taste Indian.
Right, absolutely. And so that's wonderful. And I think when I talked with her last, her next book was supposed to be on spices, but maybe that's changed. I don't know, but definitely she's very good about,
maybe it's both.
It could be both. But I think the other cookbook that does do a great job with kind of Ayurveda and cultural different ethnic cuisines is Miriam Hospodar's book, which now is probably over 20 years old, but it's Maharishi Ayurveda, Heaven's Banquet. So that's got a lot of different ethnic cuisines in it. It's not complicated either, so that's a good one as well. So awesome. Well, it sounds like you really want to focus on the, which is a major component of Ayurveda, but the food and healing component. When you're working with clients, and so awesome.
And I think also, like when people come to you, they're not Googling, most of them aren't Googling Ayurveda, they're Googling, how do I get rid of my diverticulitis? And it's like they're looking for you to solve a problem that they have.
It's not, they want something practical.
And so when we market to them, we need to speak in terms of what they are looking for,
right.
And that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a vegan diet or an Ayurvedic diet or anything like that. They're looking for, how do I cut my medical bills? How do I, get off of some of these meds? How to avoid getting my foot amputated, or reverse my vision loss, and we may not be able to do any of that, but we might be part of a solution that, holds the line so they don't lose any more vision, or along with some other things that they might do, they might actually reverse it. I know Dr. Cousins obsessed with that.
No, that's really good. I like what you just said. It's very practical that, this isn't, people are looking to solve problems. And if Ayurveda can be a part of, and I also like what you said about Ayurveda and Ayurvedic practitioners, people who are bringing this wisdom out into the world. It's not that, we don't have to be the be all and end all, but if we can be a part of the solution, that's good.
That's good. And I think that, if we're starting from a very, very, very young age and constantly eating life in balance, then, we're not going to get the diseases that we might be genetically predestined to. Or if we do, they'll be much more manageable, and when we do, they'll be more about karma than about diet and lifestyle. And so I think it's like the earlier you can get onto a path that's right for you, for your digestive type and everything, the better it's going to be. And the medical profession, as I indicated before, is struggling. Like in the United Kingdom, I read something that, with the projected growth of type 2 diabetes, they think that it could bankrupt the National Health Service. I read another thing in the United States where the projected growth rate in obesity and comorbidities, which would be like heart disease, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, type 2 diabetes, and other things, that could bankrupt the U.S. economy. And
yeah, I know you bring up a wonderful point, that just like lots of things that are happening today in terms of where certain systems are, the medical system, our current healthcare paradigm, I don't think there's any question that it's not sustainable. So the more that we can offer at earlier stages, it's really very helpful. Do you want to specifically focus on type 2 diabetes in terms of Ayurveda, or are you going to be broader than that?
I haven't decided yet. I should have type 2 diabetes. It runs in the family. When I am not paying attention, when I'm out of balance, I head towards metabolic disorder and type 2 diabetes. So
Sure.
I feel like that's something that I could relate to, but also at the same time, there's a lot of mental health disorders in my family, and I've used a lot of holistic things to address the mental health disorders. So I'm not sure, but when you're addressing one, you're addressing the other, right? So
absolutely.
The solution is basically the same. Oh, you've got a Vata imbalance. Maybe it's manifesting as type 2 diabetes. It's manifesting as anxiety, fear, depression, whatever. And then you get onto a diet and lifestyle program that's balancing the underlying doshas, like Vata balance or Pitta
right,
balance.
and then it'll have a positive effect overall. There's no doubt. Okay.
So I have.
I look forward to seeing how your continuing journey unfolds, Susan.
Thank you.
I know we're getting toward time, so I'd like to just do a couple of rapid fire questions if
Sure.
you're game for that. Okay,
sure.
Awesome. What do the words patience and persistence mean to you?
Wait a second, I'm getting a call here. Okay,
Sure.
Are you there? Okay,
I am.
Patience and persistence. What do they mean to me?
Sure.
Well, gosh, I'm not sure how to answer that. But patience, it's about. Well, I think it's like what has blocked me from having patience and persistence. And patience, it's often anger and irritability, which can have to do or a sense of being out of my body because I'm too anxious, and I suffer from a lot of anxiety and some irritability and sometimes depression. But and in those states, I have a hard time being patient, and so it's being able to be patient is about doing a lot of self-care, so that when things that might test my patience come up, I'm not knocked out of balance so much, or maybe I'm not even affected at all. And so in order to be patient, I have to be in alignment with myself. And in terms of persistence, is that what you said? It's the same thing. If you're overly kapha, you're going to feel you'll have this huge list of things that you want to do, but you're feeling down, like you just want to sit in bed under the covers and stream Netflix, or your Sadhaka Pitta is imbalanced, and so you have a hard time. Your joy isn't there, and so you have a hard time. You might have dreams, but you have a hard time manifesting them because you're of this imbalance. And so for me, I look at like where in my life I've been blocked in my persistence and my patience. And Ayurveda gives me a tool set to enable me to spend more time in a place of patience and persistence. And being out of balance forces me to spend more time in a state where I'm not patient and not persistent on achieving my goals.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now that our lives have become more virtual, meaning our connections are also more virtual, do you have any tips for shifting into this new era, which seems to be here to stay?
That's really interesting because I just saw this YouTube video recently, like in the past couple of weeks, by someone who, I don't remember his name, but it's some kind of an Indian. Sorry.
I think we got some planes going by.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the question again? Sorry.
That's okay. Let me just restate. Now that our lives have become more virtual, meaning our connections are also more virtual, do you have any tips for shifting into this new era, which seems to be here to stay?
Yeah, I think it's all about getting in alignment with our higher selves, our consciousness, the Buddha nature, the God self, the Christ consciousness, the goddess, whatever you want to call it. And I was listening to this YouTube video recently by somebody who I think is some kind of an Indian guru, and I can't remember his name, and he was talking about like people having like different sort of a point system. And there's like normal everyday people, and then there's people who become rich, and then there's people who become rich and famous, and there's people who become like president or king or queen, and then there's like spiritual adepts who become enlightened. And what they said is like when you start to have success, you're not going to be truly happy. You might have lots of financial success, but you're not going to be truly happy unless you have an alignment to a spiritual practice or a religious practice. And same thing with like when you become king or queen or the movie star that's like, or billionaire, or, obviously like an enlightened master, that you might achieve all these physical things, but you're not going to have the peace and the happiness. You're not going to be able to enjoy it as much unless you have that spiritual practice. And when we have that spiritual practice, we might feel lonely for people, but when we're really in alignment with the Tao, the all that is, the consciousness, then we're in alignment with love. And then sometimes like my spiritual teacher will say, I don't feel lonely when I'm alone, because she's so connected to the consciousness. And I think we need to have a spiritual practice because so that when we are in relationship with others, we're vibrating at the highest possible frequency, so that the interactions are better, and so that we're, I don't.
I think what I'm hearing is that a deep spiritual connection is essential to, having that solid core foundation.
That's the first. And that's what every religion teaches us. It says, in some way, shape, or form, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all of the things shall be added unto you. And it's like, you get the material wealth, you become a billionaire, you're not going to be truly happy. You become king, queen, whatever, you're not going to be truly happy unless you have a spiritual path. And when you do have this spiritual path, and you're hooked up to the all that is, so that you're not depleting your own battery when you go out in the world to bring your gifts into the world. You're
sure. And you can also, you even with the spiritual practice, it doesn't necessarily translate into you not having the wealth and prosperity. You can actually enjoy more fully the fruits, the wealth, and the prosperity.
And that's a very important part of the Maharishi Ayurvedic program, which is connection to consciousness.
Absolutely. It's fundamental. There's no doubt. What are the top 3 tips that you can offer that are simple yet profoundly healing?
Well, if you have any kind of a vata imbalance, the oiling and the abhyanga, at first I resisted it because I thought that it was so messy, but it really creates a barrier between you and the world, both from psychic attack, physical pollution attack, like, especially if you're in a cold, windy area, when I would do it, I was in a place where I was experiencing some family trauma, and there was a lot of negativity coming at me. And I remember the first time I put it all over my head, like I felt, I could feel it blocked. I could feel it blocked, which is crazy. You're like, really? And I would walk around like it was cold, high mountains in high altitude, high desert plains in October. And I would put, the oil on, and I felt like I had this secret protective barrier between me and the world. So that's one, is,
Sure.
if you're vata, or, have a lot of anxiety, that's one. Another thing is to realize that, you can do these, like, they're called Buddha bowls, and it doesn't have to be an Indian flavor, but you can get most of the way there by doing balanced Buddha bowls. There's a book called Power Plates, I think, by a registered dietitian or a nutritionist. And that one has, I wouldn't do exactly those ratios, but great sauces, great, nutritionally balanced meals that are going to bring in flavors from all over the world that you can customize to be more Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. So that would be another thing, because
Yeah, I think actually from an Ayurvedic perspective, there is a book that incorporates quite a bit of that, and that is this same author, Sahara Rose, who has the
yes
higher purpose or highest purpose
it's called Eat Feel Fresh
podcast. Yeah, Eat Feel
Yes,
Fresh. She's got a
that's
lot
the
of the
book.
Buddha bowls, and they're Ayurvedic, and it's vegan as well, not vegetarian. So
Yes.
that's also another option if people want to look at her book as well.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
Because then it's all done for you. There's not a,
It's
so,
not a guessing game. Yeah.
yeah. And then, I don't know what would be the third. I think it's really important to go out when you do, you're going to, be given the dinacharya, the things we have to do in the morning to be imbalanced. And when I do all or most of them, I feel more energy, and I feel more grounded, and I feel more happy for the rest of the day. But it's about, like, so I think that sticking to those as much as possible. When I get off of them, then I feel really out of balance. And when I do go with them, then I'm like, oh, this is amazing. So I would, follow these crazy old wives' tales.
Yeah, it's no, that's a great point, because the daily routine, the dinacharya, it's called in Ayurveda, but especially the morning routine. I think you bring up a great point that if you're putting yourself first, and you're putting self-care first, it sets the tone for the day. And in fact, you're happier. And when you're happier, you're more productive and you're more energized.
Right. And if you can't do all of it, go ahead.
And it's one of Maharishi's principles is do less and accomplish more. So, we can, we have to do this in the morning, but we're definitely going to be more productive throughout the day. So, which may seem counterintuitive because we're taking time to do that, but
and if you can't do all of it, do what you can and don't stress it. But I will say that when you go to Fairfield and you see a lot of these people who met Maharishi and started studying under him and were initiated by him, like in the early 70s, and these people are glowing and they're vibrant, and it's a testament to the dedication to the lifestyle, and make adjustments for yourself, but I think it's so important at this time in history where conventional medicine is failing, it's not achieving all of its goals, not living up to its potential. And they're starting to delve into functional medicine, but we have so much more wisdom if we can bring in the Ayurvedic wisdom. And it's a gift that we can bring to the world and help people. And for me, like, I was told a long time ago by a Vedic astrologer that I would make a lot of money in nutrition and vibrational medicine. And, that was, I don't know how many, 20 years ago, probably. 18 years ago. And I'm only just now having the courage to really start following that. And I think, try very hard to listen to your inner voice. And here's something I got from a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And there's this one guy who went to law school for the first 2 years. It takes 3 years to get through law school, as you know, as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And after 2 years, he discovered, I think I'd rather go and become a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And so he dropped out of law school, and his father was very angry and said, well, you just wasted that money. And he said, I'm not paying for your PhD in psychology. And he said, well, Dad, I didn't waste the money because I had to go that way to discover I wanted to go this way. And it's
That's true.
And when you're on autopilot flying from, New York to Los Angeles, you're not making a straight thing. It's like the autopilot is constantly correcting back and forth. And
course correction.
And we need to listen to our intuition. And sometimes it's something else that we think it's our intuition, but it's something else. And so we need to develop the skills to be able to get centered and listen to that voice so that we can course correct. And hopefully we will have course corrected, like this, instead of when we're way down here. And so the tools of Ayurveda are really about that. And Chinese traditional medicine and everything else. But one of the things I really like a lot about the Ayurveda is it starts with the diet. Like they say, 30% of the healing is the supplements, the herbs, but 100% is the diet. And whereas with Chinese traditional medicine, they never really told me about diet. They just, except for this one woman that I worked with, the one that I talked to you about, but a traditional Chinese medicine doctor who just did that, never said change your diet. They just, did the acupuncture and the herbs. And there's this one Ayurvedic doctor that I know who says that she won't work with somebody unless they go vegan because they get into balance much more quickly and they stay in balance. And so I think that it's like we need to start moving ourselves in balance as much as possible. And it starts with the diet. So if you can't afford the herbs and the supplements or whatever, just go and be told, what type of diet you need to be doing, what to avoid, what to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's just, if consciousness and diet are off, then medicine is of no use, really. So, it's those things are actually it's harder to change patterns, but, once those changes are made, they're, it's just a daily practice. It's easy to do. So, yeah. Great. Your greatest teacher of Ayurveda. I'm sure there'll be many more.
Yes. Well, I have to say Dr. Cousins because of, the framework that he provided me with, not just with Ayurveda, but with acid alkaline balancing and all those other things.
Right.
But, within the program, I mean, just
it definitely doesn't have to be within the program. So I think Gabriel Cousins is a master, and he doesn't exclude anything. He addresses everything, including Ayurveda. So it's just really beautiful what he does. Your favorite book about Ayurveda?
Well, I do like What to Eat for How You Feel, but I also I actually took the chef training course with Divya.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, but I really like the Eat Feel Fresh by Sakara Rose, and then the Vegan Ayurvedic Kitchen are both very good. But
I'm not familiar with Vegan Who do you know who the author is of that one? Or
I can't remember. She's in Santa Cruz. It might be the Ayurvedic Vegan Kitchen or Vegan Ayurvedic Kitchen, something like that.
We'll find it. Yeah, that's good. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think those are
all good. Those are all great references. Thank you for those.
Yeah.
What you wished for in your life that you were grateful did not occur?
The first one that comes to mind is when I was in junior high, I wanted to be a movie star.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah. And then you think about, you just look at Yeah. And you look at, before we used to look up at these people and say, oh, it must have been so great being so famous. But, now you look at it and realize, that is a huge burden. They lose a lot of privacy. They, it's not as great as it's cracked up to be. And I think I'm very grateful for, experiencing poverty in my life, because
Mm-hmm.
it helps me to understand, what it's like for everyday people trying to afford to eat healthy.
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective that you take. So instead of having the poor me's because of circumstances and change in your financial fortune, financial status over the course of your life, you're willing to say, hey, I can really see what the challenges can be. And out of those challenges, comes resourcefulness, sort of like the planet Saturn, it gives us the constraints. So, and the constraints and the discipline. So looking at that, we can, we have an opportunity to say, hey, is this doable? How can I manage this? And really to pay it forward and show others how they can manage it as well and do it well.
Yes.
And also the tools to change your situation as well. So, awesome. Okay. Well, now we're going into the fall season. So your top Ayurvedic tip for the fall?
Roasted sweet potatoes. And the abhyanga.
Abhyanga and roasted. Yeah, that's both really great for the fall. Thank you. First thing you do when you get out of bed in the morning?
I go into the bathroom and I scrape my tongue. And
okay, so you stimulate the digestion, remove toxins, do all that good stuff with your tongue scraper. Yep. Wouldn't live without it now that I do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Healthy habits are easy to start, but hard to maintain.
That's very
true. And Ayurveda is all about healthy habits. Describe the best advice you have ever received in maintaining healthy habits in your life.
The best advice on maintaining, I'm very Vata. I can be very Vata imbalanced, and Vatas hate habits. And really out of
I know. We don't. I have a good deal of Vata in me as well. And we don't really like all that routine. We know it's good for us, but we don't really always enjoy it. We like variety and creativity and fun.
I think it's, yes, exactly. And spontaneity and not being tied down. That's so boring.
Sure.
I think it, just don't stop getting back on the wagon. If you're a Vata, just keep, do what you can and, do your best and let God take care of the rest. Because I have a very, I've had a very unbalanced lifestyle for the first 2 years of this program, because I didn't have a stable home. I didn't have, all kinds of things. And now I've just gotten a stable home for the first time, and I'm setting up my own kitchen for the first time in the 2 years of doing this program, where I can start to really sort of ground myself. Now, theoretically, you'd be able to ground yourself with all of your, the herbs and the diet and whatever, but it was very hard for me to maintain the diet. And it was very hard for me to maintain the structure of the daily routines. And now it's like I'm moving towards being able to put those things in practice. And sometimes you need something else. Like for me, I was going through a lot of trauma. And it's like I'm going off on a tangent, I know, but I ended up like I went to my therapist and I said, I wish you could just prescribe me a Valium, because for a lot of the last like year and a half, 2 years, there's been a lot of upheaval in my life. And she said, well, why don't you drive across the bridge into that other state and get some, some marijuana. And I didn't want to smoke it. but I knew that in Ayurveda, pranavata, one of the Ayurvedic remedies was ganja, which is slang for pot, but it actually was an Ayurvedic remedy that included a number of things, including cannabis. So I knew that cannabis could be good for bringing down the pranavata. And so I drove across the bridge and went into this other state. And I went and I got some, I said, look, I'm going through a family trauma and I need something that's going to be like a value for me. And I started doing this. And for the first time since I started this program, like the vata started like getting totally balanced out in my pulse. And so, I'm doing this experiment on myself, and, how do you handle somebody who sometimes is like so stressed out and so anxious that they can't ground themselves enough to meditate and get into alignment with everything? And what
that's a really good point. I think there's a couple of takeaways there. I think that, Ayurveda doesn't exclude anything. So anything that heals is considered Ayurvedic. And sometimes something stronger is required, especially if there's an undercurrent of trauma. Sometimes there's a gentle approach that can happen later, but sometimes there is something stronger that is required. So thank you for sharing that. And I think you also shared something that's important, is that it is challenging to create those habits, those healthy habits, without a solid foundation of home and place and kitchen, and those things, that's really like bringing in the earth element. It's fundamental, it's foundational.
Especially
right, absolutely. And I think you'll see a real shift now that you are grounding in that way, in terms of your own personal experience. So I really think that's awesome. The other thing that I think is a great takeaway from what you said is that in Ayurveda, the vatas, that we like creativity and change and fun and flow, and but then we can quickly get out of balance, and we don't necessarily like habits, and we don't like discipline. And so once we perceive that there's habits and discipline, it's like, no, I don't want that. Don't sign me up. Okay. But
boring.
Boring. Yeah. But what I've discovered is by adopting some of these habits and these disciplines that Ayurveda offers, that I have more freedom, not less. I have more freedom to be creative. I have more freedom to have fun. I have more energy. So that's why, for me, looking at these disciplines and these habits and these daily routines, they are not boring at all. They are totally welcome, because then I can be the balanced, beautiful vata, and not the imbalanced vata that's, has to drive across the bridge to do, whatever,
it's like you're grounded enough that you bring out the beauty of the vata,
I'm bringing out the beauty of vata and the balanced vata, and not the imbalanced one that I'm not really getting anything done. I'm scattered. I'm moving a lot. I'm erratic. I'm not reliable. I don't want to be those things. So, so what the biggest takeaway for me is that those disciplines and habits, they really bring us freedom. So awesome.
Yeah. And they're the best thing for us, because it's like a kapha, they're the opposite. They're very, very grounded. And so for them, they need something to get them up and moving.
They need stimulating activities and, motion, movement. Spices. Absolutely. Spices. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And that helps them to keep from getting too lethargic. Whereas like the vata needs less spice, less stimulation, so that they're grounded enough so that just their natural inspiration can take over.
Yeah, their natural inspiration. I love that. So, Well, thank you, Susan. This has been really wonderful spending the time with you and this beautiful setting that you're in New Jersey. Cape May, you said, in New Jersey. It's
I'm headed
gorgeous.
down in the Pine Barrens right now. Yeah, but I hate May.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, where can our viewers and listeners find you?
So I'm setting up a Facebook page, and I think it's Vegan Ayurveda or Ayurvedic Vegan, something like that. But you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Susan G. Barney. And
Susan G. Barney. Okay, I will include that in the show
notes.
notes.
We'll put something in the notes. I'll get the exact Facebook page that I'm creating.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today at the Ayurveda with Noreen podcast. And you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too.